So how do we add a new amendment to the Constitution? The anti-self-defense advocates want a new 28th Amendment that would enshrine gun control. Of course, others have called for a new amendment to basically delete the Second Amendment. And I'm sure there's plenty of other wacky ideas that might be coming up as time goes along. But again, how does it all work? How does that idea translate into reality? That's what we're going to be taking a look at in this video. We're going to be talking about not only the constitutional steps that need to go through it, but also how likely are they to succeed when we're talking about Second Amendment issues. I'm also going to be giving you a quick breakdown of state legislatures all across the country. So guys, let's get into it. So in Article 5 Convention, what were we talking about? We're talking about Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, which basically sets forth, among other things, the method for how new amendments can be added to the Constitution and therefore become the law of the land. Thanks to the 14th Amendment, keep in mind that anything that gets added to the Constitution to check the federal government power also winds up checking state government power as well. So basically, you can kind of understand this as being broken out into two different parts. Part one is how do we trigger the convention? In other words, how do we start the ball rolling? How do we get everything moving here? The second thing then is, okay, the convention's happened. How do we now wind up ratifying this? How do the states wind up reading whatever came out of this and approving and giving it the up-down vote that comes out of it? So it's going to be broken up into those two different parts, and we're going to be, again, looking at basically the political lens of the likelihood of some sort of success or another coming out of this process. So the first way of triggering this is if you have 2/3 of both basically the Senate as well as the House. So 2/3 of Congress need to vote for this. So for those of you at home or are slow at doing math, we're talking about 66% or greater. Broadly speaking, that's not going to happen, at least when we come to a very partisan issue, whatever it may be. It's almost impossible to get a 2/3 majority in the Senate for either party. And even though the House can be a little bit more wishy-washy, good luck getting it through the Senate. So realistically, if something were to be triggered to create an Article 5 convention, it will likely come from the second means, or at least it could come from the second means. Here we need 2/3 of state legislatures, not governors, not Supreme Courts, state legislatures in order to trigger. So there's 50 states at the time of this video in 2023. That means that we would need 34 state legislatures to force Congress to call an Article 5 convention. So what does this actually look like? Now, you know I really don't like to talk about politics, but we have to dive into this here. And look, this is not a Republican-Democrat thing, and please don't take anything I'm saying here as cheerleading. It's just this is what we have to get into here, all right? So the Democrats control 19 state legislatures. Republicans control 28. And there are 3 that are basically split. In other words, Republicans hold the House, Democrats hold the Senate, or vice versa. Okay, so that's what we're looking at here. Now, keep in mind, the magic number is going to be 34. So right off the bat, even if all 3 of those split wind up going to the Democrats, that only puts them at 22, which means that they would need 12 Republican legislatures to slip and slide in order to vote for an Article 5 convention with the explicit goal of basically gutting the Second Amendment. That's going to be a tough sell. And not to mention the fact that some of these split ones, actually all of them really, if you look at them, which are Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Alaska, these are not exactly states that really scream gun control when I look at them, particularly when I'm talking about Alaska and Pennsylvania. Maybe Virginia is sliding a little bit more so. So just keep in mind that obviously the parties, both of them, will run different candidates in different places. As the expression goes, maybe a California Republican could be a Wyoming Democrat or vice versa, right? But this is still going to be a very tough sell in various places. Now, just the same, even if the antis are able to get it that far, so be it. Now coming out of the convention, and by the way, there's really no rules set up for the convention as to who's going to be the appointed people, what procedures they have to put into place, all that kind of stuff. So we can look back in history. And if you want me to do more about that, let me know in the comment section below. But otherwise, if you're wondering why I'm not covering how the convention itself would be run, broadly speaking, there's really no rules set forth or prescribed by the Constitution. That's why. But again, let me know in the comment section below. So following the Article 5 convention, in order to ratify what actually happened there in case the convention went off the rails, we now need 75% of state legislatures or state conventions. I'm going to focus on legislatures, but we need 75 state legislatures to basically confirm that, yep, we're voting for this. Now we see the exact wording and what's going on here. It's no longer a vague concept. It's written concretely out. Yes, we're voting that. We're giving that an up, down. So we already did the exact math above, talking about state legislatures and where do they all fall. And we established the fact that the Democrats have an awfully long way to go if they're trying to actually flip all those legislatures. So let's basically stack the deck as much in the anti's favor as possible to see just how close they can try to get this through. Before I do, if you like this kind of video, because it's a little bit different than what we typically do here, let me know by clicking like. It tells both myself that you got something out of this, as well as lets YouTube algorithm know that other people should be seeing this. Of course, don't forget, we also have channel membership if you want to help to pay for our cameras or time, our full-time video production specialist, all that kind of stuff. And it's also a great way to gain exclusive access to our behind-the-scenes hangout sessions, casual Q&As, and so forth. Also, don't forget to hit subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of our future videos coming out. Stacking the deck in their favor the most. Let's use the 2008 Obama electoral map. This was, of course, the very first presidential election, which elected President Obama and swept him into office, and saw largely the largest Democratic rout that we've seen in basically the modern era. And I'm also going to stack it even further. I'm going to throw Arizona and Georgia, which are two states that then went red, but are a little bit more purpley these days. Let's just throw it into their favor. And guys, yes, I recognize the fact that we're talking about electoral maps right now, and before we were talking about state legislatures, which is actually how this process goes. But again, I'm stacking it the most possible that I can do in the anti's favor. So 75%, that means that they need 38 states. Giving them Georgia, giving them Arizona, that leaves 19 states that would almost certainly not ratify. Almost certainly. The antis would need to grab 8 of those. So which ones are they grabbing? Texas, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, or West Virginia? Which of those states are they grabbing? Because I don't see them grabbing, candidly, any of them, let alone close to half of them, which is what they're going to need. So the bottom line is that if we're talking about doing something extreme, and let's make no mistake about it, the recently discussed 28th Amendment that's being proposed by the California governor that would, in essence, all but in name only, destroy the Second Amendment. This is an extreme and radical and dangerous resolution, which, by the way, has no basis in logic, reason, or statistics, let alone history. But don't let any of that get in the way of a good narrative that you can fundraise off of, right? But which states would they be picking off? It's just not going to happen. So we're going to have to see, of course, where this all goes, how this all plays out. More reasonably, the way that we are going to see gun control come through is we're going to have to see how some big cases wind up coming through the U.S. Supreme Court. But that's it. It's the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Supreme Court is really, at the end of the day, the guardrails to protect our liberty across so many different things. And we're going to see it play out here. What guardrails does the U.S. Supreme Court put up when we're talking about all sorts of different cases? Because after all, we've seen insane amounts of gun control pass state legislatures from coast to coast in a number of different states, California, New York, Illinois, just to pick off a few, let alone, of course, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Mexico has been proposed, Minnesota, Colorado, and so forth. So it's going to be the U.S. Supreme Court that's going to have to protect our rights at the end of the day in order to stop the anti-self-defense advocates from their radical agenda of making sure that victims cannot protect themselves. Because at the end of the day, if you want to take away the tools for self-defense, that makes you anti-self-defense. So thanks for sticking around this long in the video, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoyed this one, please feel free to check out some of our other great content, and we'll see you in the next one.